Okay, let's go ahead and get started talking about the Pythagorean Theorem. And the Pythagorean Theorem is kind of an old one. You probably haven't heard about in your history classes about what they called the cult of Pythagoras. Now, Pythagoras was kind of a weirdo. He was obsessed with triangles. And what he noticed is that there was a pattern, especially with right triangles. Now, if we say we've got a right triangle with legs A and B, and this long side here, opposite that right angle, is called our hypotenuse. What he noticed is that the sum of the squares of these legs is equal to the square of the hypotenuse. And most famously, you'd probably think of this as a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. Now, if we were looking at this, you'd notice that, say we had a triangle that was, I don't know, let's do something that looks like this. Say we've got one where I've got one side is 6 and one side is 8, and this last side here is 10. I could prove this. I could say, well, let's take a look at this. If a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then this side right here, that's 6 squared plus this 8 squared should be equal to 10 squared. This is a triangle that can exist. Well, 6 squared is going to be 36. 8 squared is going to be 64. Now let's see if that's equal to 100. Well, true enough. This looks like pretty good math to me. 36 plus 64 is in fact 100. 100 is equal to 100. So the math on this checks out. Yeah, let's take a... Now, the funny thing here is we can use this property of triangles to solve for a missing side. So, let's say we've got something like a triangle that has sides of, say, 3 and 4, but I don't know what this last side is. And I'll just call this last side, well, how about I just say C. Now, with this, we're going to notice that we'll have my two sides. Well, I already know that a squared plus that b squared is equal to that c squared. So this is going to be 3 squared plus 4 squared is equal to c squared. 3 squared is 9. 4 squared is 16. This is equal to this c squared. Now, 9 plus 16 is 25. That's equal to this c squared. And with this, I could in fact say, well, what number squared is equal to 25? We have a sort of a thought process here that says, what number squared could be equal to 25? Well, if I were to take the square root of both sides, I would find that my answer here is 5. What? Now, this is actually an incomplete process. There's actually another answer that would satisfy a square root, but we're not going to talk about that just yet. In the meantime, we're going to work with this. And notice that with this, if I wanted to find the square root of a number, I could just say, well, let's see, what could I do? I could just take the square root of both sides of this equation. So I could say that c, since c squared is equal to this a squared plus b squared, if I were to take the square root of both sides of this equation, I would end up having my answer. So I could say c is equal to this square root of a squared plus b squared. I want you to be very, very careful here, because notice that 9 and 16, they add up to be 25. But 3 and 4 don't add up to be 5. So make no mistake, this that if you say the square root of a squared plus b squared is not the same as the square root of a squared plus the square root of b squared. I can't do this. If I do that, I will get myself into trouble because, well, if I tried to do that up here, I would have said 5 is the same thing as 7. It's not. But now let's go ahead and let's try another example with this. I'm going to go ahead and give myself a triangle with legs of 5 and 12. And I'll say this is my C. So using this formula, where I said C was equal to this square root of a squared plus b squared, I could say, well, C is going to be equal to the square root of 5 squared plus 12 squared. That's going to be square root of 25 plus 144, or square root of 169. I mentioned it, I didn't write it down, but there is a number that squared is going to be 169, and that number is 13. Now, if these were inches, if this is 5 inches and 12 inches, that would be 13 inches. Units are also an important part of our answers. Hopefully this makes sense. If you have any questions, shoot me a message. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.